story of the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, the story of Abraham. Okay, train a large language model on that because it's integrated into the cosmic order, however you want to say it. How far do you go with this? I mean, like, do you train this model on the New Testament?
Know.
Do you train it on the epistles?
We're playing with that. I don't know.
Do you train it on John Milton?
Good question. Dante.
Dante, Ovid.
So imagine, that's a very good question. So imagine that at the foundation, you have the biblical library.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but then you have, like you said, the secondary literatures.
What about the Quran?
We want to train a separate one on the Quran. The
keep them
and then we want to have them debate. Yeah. Well, what's really interesting in the case of Islam, because there's an insistence in the Islamic world that the entire epistemology is actually contained in the text and nothing else.
I think the mistake that people make in comparative religion between Islam and Christianity is that they think that the Bible in Christianity is what the Quran is in Islam.
Yeah, right.
I
That's
think
just not the case.
In Islam, the word becomes a book, and in Christianity, the word becomes a person.
Yeah.
I think Jesus is to Christianity what the Quran is to Islam, right?
Absolutely.
And that's probably...
And that's a big difference.
I think that's a mistake that people make, partly because, the Quran is infallible.
Right.
You can't think that any word of the Quran is wrong because it's the literal and altered word of God. Whereas with the Bible, you've got a bit more leeway, say it's mythology, or maybe there's a historical contradiction, but it's not actually that much of a problem. However, if you had Jesus in front of you, you can't contradict him, right? I think that's an important distinction for people to keep in mind.
That also makes the logos the living word.
Yeah,
right. It makes it
more difficult to put forward the somewhat naive criticism that I think people often make of the Gospels as contradicting each other. Because again, like we're talking like historically here, was Herod on the throne at the same time Quirinius was the governor of Syria as Lucius?
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, in a sense, who cares? I mean, one of the points that my friend John Nelson has made brilliantly is, have you ever come across the concept of the, what do they call it? The Churchillian drift, where a bunch of quotes that Churchill never said just get attributed to him. I find that the best breakfast is
that's part of the pattern of mythologization.
If someone says, I think
they fall into his orbit because they're of his type.
I think the best breakfast in the morning is a glass of champagne, a hearty glass of champagne. Right? He never said that, but people sort of think maybe he said that.
Sounds like something Churchill might have said.
Same thing happens with C.S. Lewis. Now, the point that my friend John pointed out to me was that, well, if all you had, the only information you had about Winston Churchill was a book of apocryphal quotes that people had attributed to him and agreed that he'd said, you'd still probably get a pretty good idea about who Winston Churchill was.
Yeah, well.
And that's something you can do with the Bible.
Well, that's partly because or
the Gospels.
You put something, you see, let's say that there's a shape, there's a three-dimensional shape on the wall, and the wall's like flat white, so you can't really see it. So what you want to do is you want to throw a bunch of like garbage at the wall, so to speak. And the outline, despite the fact that everything you throw at the wall is garbage and it lands in many different places, if you throw enough of it at the wall, you'll get the shape.
Yeah.
Well, it's partly because you could imagine that there's a set of sayings that have been misremembered, but a fairly comprehensive set. You're still going to be able to extract signal, right? There's going to be noise, but there's going to be signal there. That's partly because the truth will be encoded in the panoply of the...
That's why it's a bigger problem if somebody points out like some flat historical... if there was discovered just like a flat historical contradiction in the Quran, that'd be a big problem because the Quran is the literal word of God. If someone points out a flat historical contradiction in the Gospels, it kind of doesn't matter as much because you're able to accept that maybe that is just a contradiction, but the thing that matters is the word of God. And the word of God is not the Gospel of Luke or the Gospel of John, but the person that they were sort of writing about.
Well, that's also partly, you see, that you just pointed to another reason why I don't like the over-concretized questions.
Yeah.
It's like, you're looking for truth in the wrong place there, buddy.
I understand that, but it also depends on what kind of truth you're looking for, right? Because for me, as an interested third party,
everything depends on that.
I'd really like to know if Jesus actually rose from the dead as a historical fact. I'd love to know if there was a real Exodus. That's really interesting and important to me. Now,